Chapter 572. The alert system of the abyssal region sounded once more. This time there was no need. Ghost Eye exerted force, and it was as if fireworks had been set off overhead. The ghostly flames flickered and extinguished in the abyssal region. The fear and awe that Danny suffered was child's play. Even if a mental-type extraordinary exerted force did not interfere with the material plane, the pressure it exerted in the mental domain was enough to affect all ability users in the relevant areas. This included the ordinary people of the secular world who were unaware of it. There was nothing to be done. Even extraordinaries could not treat a distance of 500 kilometers lightly. They had to fully utilize the environment of the abyssal region and forcefully distort space and time in order to effectively touch it. In this way, it was simply an impossible task to perform a technique that did not contain any smoke or fire. At least 100 million people in Xia City will have nightmares tonight. Gao Ming took out a paper talisman and twirled it between his fingers. Under normal circumstances, Xia City was guarded by two great extraordinaries. Ghost Eye's straightforward and direct attack would have pushed him back into the sea before he could even reach the shore. But Luo Nan had made a bet with someone else. Not to mention Ouyang Qin, even Her Majesty Empress Wu had no reaction. Clearly they had tacitly agreed. Oh, it wasn't just that. Ouyang Qin gave another order at this time. SVIP-09 model, preparing to detach. Execute in 30 seconds. Gao Ming crushed the paper talisman again. He didn't have the time to feel sorry for it. He went up and pressed down on Ouyang Qin's arm. What are you doing? Why do you want it to detach? Ouyang Qin answered, it just so happens that Ghost Eye is about to enter the battlefield. Let him accept his defeat wholeheartedly. Gao Ming looked at the back of Ouyang Qin's head as if he was an idiot. Did you take drugs? Ouyang Qin turned his face and a smile blossomed. What I mean is that the Bloodwill ring has taken shape and can already operate independently. The support of the psychic wave network is meaningless. Really? From beginning to end, it only needs a medium or springboard. Even without the psychic wave network, a simple amplification device is enough. This is its marvelous aspect. Also, the current flow of energy and information in the Bloodwill ring is actually separated by the psychic wave network. Only by detaching the psychic wave network can it fuse into one. Gao Ming grunted in acknowledgement. He finally remembered that in class, many people didn't have enough ability and needed to use the psychic wave network as a support to form the structure of the Bloodwill ring. But correspondingly, there were quite a number of people who didn't need such support. After the psychic wave network was opened, a portion of the people entered it, but there were also some who were too lazy to do so. Under such circumstances, it was a small miracle that the Ring of Bloodwill could still operate without any problems. He did not ask any more technical questions. Instead, he fixed his gaze on Ouyang. By the way, Ouyang, aren't you a little excited? Otherwise, it was rare for him to be so proactive. Without waiting for Ouyang Chen's reply, the Abyss region's warning system had already displayed the latest detection results. Standard unit of force in Gully region. This was the power of the Ghost Eye's suppression. Due to the complex calculation standards and different application methods, it was difficult to use secular standards to convert. However, Gao Ming knew that even if he exerted his full strength and used the most explosive means, the measured value would not exceed 3 standard units, and that was only the instantaneous limit. The Ghost Eye was able to maintain a value of over 10 even at a distance of 500 kilometers. This was an insurmountable gap in terms of level and realm. Its corresponding powerful force had the function of repelling all external imprints and power. Gao Ming's soul strength had only circled around the periphery of the Abyss region when he felt the chirping of ghosts seep into his soul. Half of his skull went cold. Mother****. He's playing for real. Ouyang Qin grunted. He's always been very serious. Gao Ming looked at the value on the other end. The spinning thousandths and the even more glaring 0 made the other half of his skull throb with pain. Luo Nan had already finished his third demonstration within the circular conference room. He didn't need to demonstrate anymore. There were 1,477 people in the conference room. There were already 1,469 people who had entered the force field of the Ring of Bloodwill. They revolved around the condensation ring and continued to use their consciousness. There were still 8 people left. Their abilities were lacking, and their attention had been broken by Ghost Eye and the chaotic battle online. In the end, they weren't able to catch the last bus. They had already been excluded. Luo Nan wasn't willing to let them disturb the state of the others, so he used hypnosis to knock them out and marked out their seat numbers. He turned his head to greet He Yuan, who was frowning in silence, and asked her to help handle the situation. Xuanhuan silently stood up. She gave him a rare glare and said in a low voice, "Don't get distracted." She informed the security team backstage as she spoke, ordering them to make preparations to deal with any accidents. Luonan smiled. His finger streaked across worker Zhai, who was next to Xuanhuan, the group of friends and relatives in the front row, and even the entire quiet conference room. As long as they don't get distracted, we'll win. Luonan had clearly forgotten at this time that there were still 30,000 people outside the conference room who had already entered the Ring of Blood Will. They could see the situation on the stage through the live broadcast camera. The spectators, who had been forcefully excluded from the scope of the lecture 3 minutes ago, exploded with resentment. The live broadcast room was instantly bathed in blood. Professor Luo has raised a good flag. Lord Ghost Eye, you're being looked down upon. Show off. Brag until the explosion. Sit and wait for the explosion. Explosion +1. Explosion +2. Explosion +10086. The resentment of the spectators had already taken effect on the illusory thundercloud within the electromagnetic field. Luonan's consciousness cut through it, but he didn't care. Rather than paying attention to this, it was better to take a look at the effects of the Ring of Blood Will. As for Ghostly Chirp, who was already shuttling through the curtain of night in Xia City, see you in a bit. The Ring of Blood Will had constructed a complete force field. The solid foundation of the configuration was already in place. Luonan's guidance was complete. Flowing water poured into the canal constructed by the Ring of Blood Will in an unending stream, raising the water level within the canal. Was this flowing water the sole strength of the people in the room? Not entirely. From Luonan's perspective, the complete driving force should include the overlapping consciousness of over 1,000 people. It came from over 1,000 people surrounding the condensation ring, a single goal, consciously and unconsciously participating with their wisdom. Every time Luonan sketched out a detail, over 1,000 people would imitate it. And the imitations of these over 1,000 people were all different. Originally, it was impossible to share these experiences with others. But in the marvelous environment constructed by the Ring of Blood Will, in front of a clear and focused target, all the impossibilities became possible. This was just like when Luonan first practiced with the condensation ring. It was a one-time, large-scale, high-volume output, screening and comparison. In the environment constructed by the Ring of Blood Will, this output, screening and comparison was amplified several dozen times over. Even if the quality of each individual wasn't excellent, Luonan had established a stable and high-quality structure. They already had an excellent direction, a reasonable arrangement of ranks, and a highly efficient mode of operation. Luonan could discard the vast majority of meaningless and trashy thoughts. This was like an enormous, cooperative cloud space. It was a supercomputer pieced together by pure manpower. Luonan's consistent guidance over a long period of time finally allowed the group of 1,400 people to form a stable group consciousness. It was a structure that could efficiently utilize the latent potential within them. In a certain sense, people didn't lack power. They just lacked the understanding to properly apply power. When the consciousness of 1,000 people in the Ring of Blood Will reached a consensus, the final bit of running-in work was completed. This result came from the hearts of everyone, but it also transcended everyone. They successfully constructed it out of nothingness. From nothing to something, from small to large, from fabricated to real. Perhaps it was still extremely weak in nature, in danger of collapse at any time. But this result was under the protection of the Ring of Blood Will. It was within an incorporeal yet spacious fortress. Alright, I nearly forgot to tell you. The name of the Ring of Blood Will in the virtual brain system was Fortress. Jianghu was a bit absent-minded right now, but she also had some understanding. She had once been to the largest and only spaceport in the solar system, Ceres Base. That was the home port of the Space Defense Fleet. It was the largest man-made celestial body ever constructed in the history of humanity. The base could accommodate 20 different types of space shuttles at the same time. There were over 20,000 soldiers stationed there. When she stayed at Ceres Base and faced the vast and boundless universe, she could always feel her own weakness and insignificance. She was exceptionally moved and treasured it. Now she felt like she was once again at Ceres Base, facing the dark sky that could devour souls. The man-made fortress was both majestic and small, but it was the source of confidence and the only thing she could rely on. The only difference was that she was no longer a tourist, but an indispensable member of the fortress. She had her own position and her own responsibilities. She was an indispensable part of the fortress operating system. It was at this moment, under the joint efforts of hundreds and thousands of comrades like her, that the cold and lifeless fortress was turned on one after another. The power source, transmission pipes, functional areas, and modules were brightly lit. The fortress came to life. It was like a living body. She could even feel the strong life energy flowing through the blood. She received this energy and injected her own strength into it, forming a perfect conduction that pushed it higher and higher. Finally, the pushing force passed a certain threshold and the powerful pushing force acted on it. The current xianxia instantly returned. She saw her body that was as solid as a statue, and she also saw everyone else who was in the same position as her. Of course, there was also the swirling mist muslin that was floating up and down in a lively manner. Perhaps she was a bit flustered for a moment, but this slight change in her mind was no longer able to resist the powerful driving force. All stray thoughts were annihilated like smoke in a puff of smoke. Only Luonan's clear instructions penetrated her heart and entered her brain, forming the only thing she could rely on. Chapter 573. Beep 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 beep. The early warning system of the Abyss region emitted a sharp and urgent alarm. The distorted lines and colors on the direct view of the force field seemed to have evolved into a storm. Although the Abyss region itself was a never-ending storm tide, the entry of Ghost Eye's extraordinary power brought about an even more chaotic and berserk attack. Ouyang Qin held his chin as he evaluated the destructive power of this storm. He heard someone mumbling behind him. Listening carefully, it sounded like someone was counting, 6, 7, 8, 9. What are you doing? It's time. Ghost Eye has already made his move. The standard of 15 seconds can't be wrong. It hasn't started yet. Why hasn't it started yet? The chilly wind is howling in anger. It hasn't blown in yet. Ouyang Qin pulled out the validation standards for the effectiveness of the Abyss region for Gao Meng to see. Although headquarters was often unreliable, the logic of these basic regulations was still relatively strict. The so-called 15 seconds that Gao Meng mentioned and the 60 seconds that Luonan had included in the wager were actually a set of standards. It referred to when the power projected into the Abyss region reached or approached one standard unit without any obvious interference and maintained relative stability for 60 seconds. The power maintained relative stability under the battle-level attack for 15 seconds. The lower limit of the force fluctuation was no less than 0. One standard unit. If this standard was met, then it proved that this person possessed the ability to explore the Abyss region and use it effectively. This person could be ranked among the ranks of first-rate psychic ability users. Of course, Luonan wasn't testing Ghost Eye himself. Instead, he was testing Ghost Eye's ability to control people's hearts and gather the power of over 1,000 people to form the blood intent ring. But the principle was the same. Ghost Eye is very restrained right now. Restrained? The hostess over there is so scared she peed her pants. A 500-kilometer attack is considered 1,000 kilometers in ancient times. Even you, Master Gao, would have to burn incense, bathe, and open an altar. At the very least, Ghost Eye hasn't done anything to the Shangding building's surroundings. It's a different story if you insist on going there. Hey, where in the world are you from? Ouyang Qin adjusted his glasses and laughed calmly. My heart has always belonged to logic and truth. Before Gao Meng could hammer him, Ouyang Qin raised a finger. What's the value of Luonan's work right now? Gao Meng shot a glance. Oh, the 1,000th point is 7. What? According to this standard, Ghost Eye can choose not to come. Oh. Gao Meng stared blankly for a moment before coming to a realization. As long as Luonan's work was unable to reach or approach one standard unit in the Abyss region, then Ghost Eye could simply ignore it according to the verification standard requirements. Luonan's gamble would be lost without a fight. Of course, other than the standard unit itself, the only ambiguous expression in the verification standard was the word close. This was also a manual correction of the ambiguity of the standard unit. Numerically, it was in the range of 0. 7 to 1. In the specific implementation process, some parameters could also be adjusted. However, the basic condition for the parameter adjustment was to be able to make contact with the verifier in the Abyss area. In other words, the effect of Luonan's work in the Abyss region could be maintained at the level of 0. 0.27 dg as long as he could make contact with the Ghost Eye and let the Ghost Eye confirm its existence. But this way, the difference between 60 seconds and 15 seconds would be blurred. This way, Ghost Eye had a lot of room to maneuver. When faced with this kind of situation, shouldn't that uncouth old man just chuckle and wave his hand in a light and breezy manner? Shouldn't he say, well done, well done? Wouldn't that suffocate the other party to death? But Ghost Eye still came and he went all out as soon as he came. He displayed a meticulous and earnest energy, and he had an imposing manner that was determined to win. This was a bit too far from his uncouth persona. Gao Ming furrowed his brows in thought. Ouyang Chen's chat time was about to end. He turned his head and continued to dispatch the maintenance team. They carried out a comprehensive and detailed monitoring of this confrontation that had yet to occur. In the end, he said, "In this gamble, the time standard is actually meaningless. Whether it's Luonan or Ghost Eye, they don't really want to win anything from each other. The so-called extraordinary photograph was just a joke. All they want is a verification. A verification of yes and no, yes and no." Does the blood intent ring exist? Even Gao Ming himself didn't believe these words. Does the new road sign exist? Does the new road sign exist? It was rare for Ouyang Chen to sigh with emotion. Gao Ming suddenly gave him a fierce shove from behind. It's going up. It's going up. Only Luonan's work could make Gao Ming react like this. Right now, on the value, the 1000th, which had been fluctuating all this time, showed no signs of stopping. However, the higher percentile began to change as well. It went from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. It went up all the way. Just as Gao Ming's voice fell, the value of 10, which had been at 0 all this time, was finally replaced by a value of 1. The change in the value of 10 wasn't as frequent as the percentile and the 1000th, but Gao Ming counted in his mind. He had just counted to 5 and the 1 had become a 2. Another 5 and the 2 had become a 3. In this way, every 5 digits represented an increase. In a short half a minute, the corresponding value had already risen to 0. 713. The momentum was strong and the increase was stable. It was simply like watching a third-rate stock market war drama. Gao Ming was still yelling, but he subconsciously pinched his throat, afraid that if he breathed too much, he would blow away this dreamlike scene. Do you have to be so awesome? This is already in line with the standard, right? Ouyang Chen grunted. He was so focused that he didn't give any response. Gao Ming wanted to push Ouyang Chen's shoulder again, but before he could exert force, he realized that he could completely sense the value within this range. His thoughts turned, and he thought of the shadow cast by Ghost Eye above the abyssal region. His palm shrunk slightly, and he pulled out a paper talisman. He immediately burned it, and his mind followed the curling green smoke to evaporate. Gao Ming felt his scalp go cold as soon as he emerged from the abyssal region. His heart sank. Admittedly, Ghost Eye had managed a great scene in the abyssal region under unrestricted circumstances. But in the surroundings, even in the deeper regions that he was powerless to explore, there existed a few faintly familiar intents. They used various methods to observe the current focal point. MMP. Gao Ming cursed. Forget about Her Majesty Empress Wu. But what's Tianbang and the others doing? And there's also Mountain Lord and Star Shaman. They've been eating dust outside the city for quite a few days. They haven't been able to come in for a cup of tea. It's normal for them to be resentful. The two people Ouyang Chen spoke of were the two extraordinaries in the outskirts of Xia City. Their purpose in coming was no different from Jin Tong, who had practically entered the gates of hell. Previously, Xia City had been sealed off at every level, not allowing ability users to enter. They were afraid of Ouyang Chen and Her Majesty Empress Wu. They didn't want to immediately shed all pretenses of cordiality, so they didn't do anything. But now that Luonan and Ghost Eye were making a bet, Xia City had opened its mouth. They came in with a face full of saliva. This could be considered as hitting the edge. This isn't fair. Gao Ming fiercely hammered Ouyang Chen's shoulder as if he was hammering the table in protest. You extraordinaries are playing basketball in the abyssal region. Have you ever thought about Luonan's feelings? Ouyang Chen shrugged. Right now, the upward curve of the blood intent ring is clear. It doesn't show any signs of weakening. The construction of the laws should be extremely stable. Right now, it's in a high-speed growth period of the formation of the mark. How beautiful. This is a true architect of the abyssal region. He has constructed his own work in the abyssal region. Piece after piece, layer after layer. For a psychic, after completing the foundation of the body and soul structure and leaving the abyssal region, though there is a grand goal in front of them, they have their feet on the ground and concentrate on basic work. Cough. Ouyang, you've said these words too many times in the past. But there are far too few good examples. Right now, this is probably the best example. Ouyang Chen continued to cross his fingers and support his chin. He focused on watching the numerical changes in the projected work area, as well as the visual rendering of the force field. It was like he was watching an incomparable masterpiece, the live drawing process. Luonan didn't have the self-awareness of drawing a masterpiece. He felt that he was more like a rookie ship captain, leading a group of rookie soldiers into the deep space of the universe where danger lurked on every side. However, this analogy wasn't accurate. Using another inaccurate analogy to describe it, when a space fortress was activated, what appeared on the outside was not a shift in space. Instead, it was a kind of transition in the energy level. There was no process of going up into the heavens or down into the sea. There was just a transition in the energy level. From the colorful and bewildering turbid flow of the mental to the mysterious and unpredictable location of the abyssal region. Then what bombarded the group consciousness of over 1,000 people within the fortress was the endless energy storm within the abyssal region. Luonan rarely entered the abyssal region in the past. On one hand, it was because his starting point was too high. The human-faced arachnid brought him to the deepest and highest place the moment he made contact with the mental plane. He was practically above everyone else. On the other hand, it was because the abyssal region gave him an overly chaotic feeling. It was restless all the time. From the perspective of the curtain at first, this was the area where the curtain twisted the most intensely. But from a more comprehensive perspective now, this was simply a storm maze that could tear a person to shreds at any time. Luonan relied on pure observation to make a living in the past. He had nothing better to do, so he went here to torment himself. But as his understanding continued to deepen and his cultivation continued to grow, he came to a deeper understanding. Even though the abyssal region was chaotic, it also contained inconceivable resources. It was just like how the deep sea was dangerous, but it also contained rich mineral deposits. Even though the deep space was deathly still, it was filled with even purer energy. For ability users, especially mental ability users, the environment they normally lived in was 1 and 2 was 2. It was very difficult to create miracles. But the abyssal region was different. This place was an extremely dangerous treasure trove that contained miracles. For the sake of improving their cultivation, increasing their realm and accumulating capital, they thought of every method possible in hopes of breaking through the barrier of the mental plane. They entered this place and gambled with their lives. Chapter 574. The force field of the Ring of Blood will lingered in the abyss area, as weak as a sprout that had just broken through the soil. But things like sprouts were the toughest because there were spreading roots below it, constantly absorbing nutrients and supplying its needs. The interweaving of spiritual light and wisdom of thousands of people, as well as the infusing of life energy from time to time, was enough to last for a while under the premise that it was used effectively. Moreover, the external environment of this sprout was admittedly still a raging storm, but at the same time, there was also a surge of energy that was as pure as sunlight. The method was a little violent, but it was good that he could absorb it. The structure of the Ring of Blood will ensure the basic efficiency of absorption and maintain the balance of the supply of nutrients from top to bottom. This process had already begun long before Luonan and Ghost Eye made their bet. It had already begun when the Ring of Blood intent was first constructed. It was just that Luonan had been the one to protect and maintain it at the time. It couldn't be considered self-sufficient. Only when the 1,469 people entered the circular conference room and became the recruits that supported the operation of the fortress did this sprout truly take shape. And under Luonan's clear goals and strategies, the sprout wasn't prepared to immediately become a towering tree after it took shape. It just built a foundation bit by bit, strengthened its roots, and used a steady and conservative method to gradually deepen its imprint in the abyssal region, expanding its domain. In this way, no matter how much the storm in the abyss region raged, it could no longer be destroyed under normal conditions. A simple and clear mark was engraved on it and gradually deepened. Unfortunately, within the space fortress that Luonan commanded and controlled, the only one who could truly experience the beauty of this balance of violence and gentleness was him, the captain. The remaining rookies did not have the ability to pull their consciousness out of the cloud space formed by the Ring of Blood and Will. They still needed to familiarize themselves with the new environment, the new pressure, and the new functional conditions. Luonan was responsible for giving them directions and cutting down some unnecessary branches. Oh, forgive him for coming to a conclusion a little too soon. Inside the force field of the Ring of Blood Will, a few hazy consciousnesses were like early maturing silkworms, nurturing or awakening spiritual lights in the chaos. Even if it hadn't broken out of its chrysalis and become a butterfly, it would only be a matter of a few rounds of stimulation. Which of them had extraordinary aptitudes? Or was it because of the Ring of Blood Will? Or could it be that he, as a teacher who was forcing a duck onto a perch, had an outstanding teaching effect? Luonan walked a few steps on the podium before suddenly laughing out loud. Just as his smile blossomed, the air flow outside the building suddenly became intense. Together with tiny water droplets, they hit the windows and the walls, forming a restless note. It was as if a ghost hiding in the night was pounding on the door. Now that the demon eye had arrived, the storm in the real world was only a greeting. The energy flow in the abyss region instantly became 10 times more restless. This was the prelude to the true attack. An extraordinary might not be able to do as he pleased in the abyss region, but his attack power against specific areas and targets was absolutely formidable. For example, Ghost Eye's attack was only aimed at the force field of the Ring of Blood in the abyss region. The job of destroying the tender sprouts? Obviously not. As an experienced transcendent, Ghost Eye's methods were both experienced and direct. As the energy flow of the abyss region bombarded the force field of the Ring of Blood there was an even more incorporeal yet profound power. It was like a chilly wind blowing from a crack. It penetrated in from every direction, every angle, and every level in an attempt to directly attack the roots. According to Luonan's cage theory, Ghost Eye was using the power of the abyss region to invade the space of consciousness of Luonan and the others. He was taking advantage of the situation to break through the barrier between the mental and material planes, digging the soil and digging the roots. This was an open and aboveboard attack without holding anything back. It was undoubtedly a method of the extraordinary level. However, Ghost Eye's methods were ultimately unable to touch the upper limits of the Ring of Blood's defensive power. From Luonan's perspective, the node of the fusion of the two rings had already taken shape within the mental deep space. It was constantly perfecting itself under the new environment, under the self-conscious correction of the cloud space. In contrast, Ghost Eye's extraordinary power was already an arrow at the end of its flight after crossing 500 kilometers. The projection of the node above the open sea had already shown clear deformations. Even though Ghost Eye was very experienced in making corrections, even going so far as to stimulate the fear in the subconscious minds of the residents of Xia City to form a beneficial environment, Ghost Eye was unable to completely make up for the attenuation brought about by the spatial barrier. As for Ghost Eye's method of digging the roots, the essence of the Ring of Blood's function was that of a fortress. Its defensive power was top-notch and it didn't give any flaws or opportunities to take advantage of. Luonan's defense was impenetrable in this confrontation of pure structural laws. Unless Ghost Eye was willing to give up his skin and ruthlessly deal a killing blow, he would be able to wipe out nearly 1,500 Xia City ability users in one fell swoop. President Ouyang and Her Majesty Empress Wu would really knock Ghost Eye to the bottom of the sea. Luonan was still pacing back and forth on the podium. The circular conference room was still silent and quiet. Only the floating shisha muslin in the air could be heard. Some areas had disintegrated, and this was the final result of Ghost Eye's first wave of attack. Yuan had already finished dealing with the eliminated students by now. She walked back to the podium and locked gazes with Luonan. Luonan smiled at her. Speaking of which, the abyss region is quite close to us. Yuan was already used to Luonan's train of thought that casually jumped out from the heavens. She didn't respond. Her gaze swept over Luonan's body, then she looked at the surrounding area. Are you all right? I'm fine. Really? I'm telling the truth. Luonan's attitude was indeed very honest. His current physical and mental state were pretty good. He was able to experience the attack methods of an extraordinary while pondering over problems. This in itself was a kind of enjoyment. It would be even better if there was someone to exchange a few words with him. Luonan saw that Yuan's tightly locked brows had yet to loosen, and he even consoled her. It's really nothing. It looks like we're separated by a piece of paper, but the standard of that paper isn't thickness. It's dimensionality. Speaking of which, things like conceptual nouns are easy to misinterpret. It's hard to say who might be misled. Yuan went, yeah. She confirmed with Ouyang Chen during this time, and she received a relatively positive response. Only then did her brows relax a bit. It's best if you stay focused. It's fine. After all, Ghost Eye is testing my work, not me. Luonan finally found someone he could communicate with. He didn't want to let go for a time. He slowly strolled to the side of the lectern. He propped himself up with one hand and assumed a more comfortable posture. He complained in a chatty manner. Who in the world came up with the name, 3 levels, 1 district, 1 domain? At first glance it looks like a very deep region. The road is long and dangerous, but it's not the case at all if you truly experience it. Let's not talk about the 3 levels. Don't you think that the abyss region is too close? The current abyss region was indeed too close to Luonan. It was just as he had said before. Under the powerful impact of Ghost Eye, The distance between the Abyss region and the real world had been compressed to the point that there was only the distance of a piece of paper left. Fortunately, it wasn't thickness. It was dimensionality. Ordinary people would be completely unaware of this, or they would feel as if they were separated by a natural moat. Host guessed there's no one who can decipher it. Wake up. It's not time to sleep yet. No matter how the group of people yelled, the reality was that the key members of Xianxi's broadcast room and the reading physiognomy program team had already become deep participants in this gambling game. They were situated in the most central region of the gambling game. They no longer had the heart to do anything else, even if that was their job. Chapter 575. Motherfucker, what are you all looking at me for? Re, the only paid guest of Xianxi's live broadcast, really wanted to stay out of this matter. However, the continuous changes in the situation had already caused him to subtly separate from his peers, making him even more eye-catching. As the only live broadcast guest who could interact with the spectators in real time, he didn't even have the time to rejoice that he had escaped a fatal gamble. He had unavoidably become the target of the focus fire. God, Re, can you explain? This was a rather polite question. Hey, it's not good to take money and be in a daze, right? This was a rather harsh question. Mr. Honeypot Mommy's boy, what else can you do besides spitting trash talk? If you have the money to raise a little Pekingese, you should at least be loud enough. This was a vendetta. When Re accepted the position of guest, he never thought that he would end up being cut apart by the host, the other guests, and even the guests of the other programs. The déjà vu of a little transparent creature hiding in a corner and barking suddenly became very intense. He really wanted to say something that would shock everyone. He wanted to insult Luonan once more. However, the current conversation on the rostrum in the round conference room was something that only those powerful individuals who were able to fight in the abyss could personally experience in his cognitive system. Of course he could explain, but wouldn't that be the same as licking Luonan's stinky feet? Then he really wouldn't release a little Pekingese. Bah! Right at this moment, a clanging sound suddenly rang out from his room. As a B-rank psychic, Re didn't need to turn his head to know that it was the sound of the curtains that weren't closed properly. The passing hurricane had blown them up, knocking over the furnishings in the living room. Xianxi was located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It was surrounded on all sides by the sea, so there was a lot of rain. After the Third World War, the global climate changed, and a few other factors made this situation more common and more intense. Re could have ignored it, but he just happened to need a reason to buffer himself from the awkward situation on the internet. Cough. It's raining heavily outside. I'm going to close the window. As he spoke, he forced himself to ignore the comments in the live broadcast room and the forum. He got up and left the range of the camera. After leaving the area, Re immediately felt his body relax. The cold sweat that he forcibly held back just now poured out. But the problem was, what about after closing the window? What should he do next? Was there a power outage? Before he could think of a way to get out of this predicament, his sensitive mind already knew that the man with the spray bottle was up to something again in the round conference room shown by the live broadcast. Probably because he had been oppressed by the energy turbulence in the abyss and felt a little uncomfortable, that guy played a new trick. He used the condensation ring formed by the thousands of participants he hypnotized to infiltrate the conference room and even outside the Shangding building. Alright, this wasn't some sort of trick, but rather an extremely exquisite operation. It was similar to replacing a peach tree with a peach tree, but it was also like defending against an enemy outside of the country. The impact of Ghost Eye's crushing force was transferred to the thin veil of water mist. There was an additional buffer zone, and there was also too much space for subsequent operations. Re was in the living room, staring blankly at the curtains that were fluttering in the wind. She was not in the mood to clean up the messy living room. In fact, this kind of thing was naturally handled by the AI butler. It was not up to him. His body was idle, but his mind was in a mess. Re was also a grade B expert and had a good teacher. Her cultivation and knowledge were not ordinary. Of course, she knew that this move of Luonan's looked simple and clear logically, but in reality, it was very difficult. When she was in a good state, she was also able to stay and cultivate in the abyss. But when it came to actual combat, it was already quite good to be able to hold on for 60 seconds of eruption. And in these 60 seconds she could only go straight against Ghost Eye. It was impossible to be like Luonan, to be in a deadlock with Ghost Eye, or even to create changes during this time. This move of Luonan's already involved the effective use of the environment in the abyss. According to Gong Chi's words, this could not be done without the power of a domain. Domain? Re was more and more afraid to return to the live broadcast room. There was only one thought left in her absent-minded mind. What else can Luonan do? What else can I do? Luonan also had this question in his heart. The game with Ghost Eye in the Abyss concerned the outcome of the bet, but it was not within the scope of his concern. In fact, whether it was the standard verification of 60 seconds or 15 seconds, he had already passed long ago. The reason why the two sides were still confronting each other in the Abyss wasn't because Ghost Eye was thick-skinned. It was because Luonan was shameless. As mentioned before, it was really rare to have such a high-level, capable and proper sparring partner. Ever since Ghost Eye's long-range attack across space, various magical abilities and methods were equivalent to the basic attack patterns of extraordinaries in the Abyss. One by one they appeared before Luonan's eyes. The truth was quite consistent with Luonan's expectations. Luonan was no longer a rookie who had just stepped into the inner world. Even though it had been less than 3 months at most, the high-level battles he had experienced during this time had already surpassed the sum total of many ability users in their entire lives. The logic world of Frost River reality, the planar crossbow of Ku Wang's communication, and the direct assassination of Jin Tong in the Outer Sea. There were as many as 3 confrontations that extraordinaries had directly participated in. In particular, he himself was sinking deeper and deeper. Whether active or passive, he had accumulated a wealth of precious experience. He had a clear reference. In addition, he could see the entire picture of the Abyss and the polar regions. He could also see the rules of the twisting curtains. He could see not only the scenery but also the skill. Several reasons were stacked together. When Ghost Eye made his move, Luonan immediately found a reference in his memories. He sorted out the corresponding rules and verified the thoughts in his heart. Sure enough, whether it was President Ouyang's logic world, Luo Yuan's planar crossbow, or Ghost Eye's long-range attack, they were all essentially the same. They all used special formats to interfere with special environments to form special scenes. The only difference was the degree of completion. The logic world had the highest degree of completion. Its laws were strict. The planar crossbow's interference power was extremely strong. It was the most lethal. As for Ghost Eye, he was the most casual in comparison. He had more or less stripped away the material plane of the energy transportation environment. He had only set up a basic structure in the Abyss, but he had fully utilized the particularity of the Abyss to make his attacks simpler and more direct. Well, the Abyss was a place that could not be ignored in the end. Right now, it seemed that the 3rd floor was no more than a prison. Though the polar regions were good, they were still a bit too far from the real plane. Only the Abyss, this wondrous dimension, could accomplish many things. It gave Luonan Tua anew. Perhaps it should be said that it made up for the part that was lacking in his system. His soul cloak and his deep-sea scene seemed to fit into the special environment and special power of the Abyss to achieve twice the result with half the effort. I really want to give it a try. Then let's give it a try. As a researcher, Luonan was very clear on how important inspiration was. He had Ghost Eye as a test subject with enough weight and restraint. No, an experimental partner. How rare was that? How could he let Ghost Eye leave under these circumstances? Ghost Eye, that old bastard, was quite generous. He really did accompany Luonan to play along. Of course, Luonan's confrontation with Ghost Eye was mostly just for absorption. Even moving the mist muslin was just a small test. The current Xia city was absolutely not a good place to truly verify the soul cloak in the deep-sea scene. To verify Luonan's most fundamental self-format, a total of 5 extraordinaries were paying attention to Luonan. They were paying attention to the blood wool bracelet. They were paying attention to the gathering of thousands of people. They were paying attention to the towering fortress that slowly set sail under the cover of the night. Every detail of the changes inside and outside of the fortress was brought under a magnifying glass for analysis. Not a single detail could be hidden from people. Needless to say, Luonan's cobweb altar was inextricably linked to this fortress. Every second that the fortress existed in the Abyss brought a wondrous force to the cobweb altar. Even if the human-faced arachnid was hidden deep in the polar region and could effectively avoid the fortress, Luonan would still need to draw a few more times to verify the fortress in this environment, no matter how big his heart was. The Xia City region was not a place for experimentation no matter what. Luonan could only shift his thoughts outwards. In any case, the range of his soul cloak had already expanded by several thousand kilometers in the past week. He could not do it in Xia City, but he could do it in the boundless wastelands and the ocean. Luonan would not let go of this learning and verification process. He slowly exhaled. His mind underwent the arrangement of the overall planning technique, cleverly dividing it into 2 sets of staggered mission sequences. One was in Xia City, absorbing nourishment like a thirst. The other was in the distant Pacific Ocean, learning and practicing on the spot. He was a beginner. There were successes and failures, but his capital was robust. His train of thought was correct. Luonan could afford to wait. He could afford to play. He could afford to train. He could afford to do several rounds of verification. Even though his mental exhaustion was quite large, he still gradually brought out the rules and regulations. He had not spoken for several minutes already. The tens of thousands of spectators, including Yuan at his side, all thought that he was doing his best to fight Ghost Eye in the abyss. They were completely unaware that half of his energy had already been divided 7,000 kilometers away. He was tossing and turning in the Pacific Ocean where mutants wreaked havoc. Luonan could not avoid adapting to this marvelous method of use while he was verifying and practicing. Unlike the monotonous cloud world where reality and illusion were indistinguishable, Luonan's consciousness wandered the earth. The first thing he sensed was a natural scene that was much more colorful. Other things aside, he sensed the state of light and darkness in different time zones at the same time. He was presented with an inconceivable macroscopic perspective. In this moment, it was as if he was stroking the soft and bumpy surface of the ocean and the earth. He was swimming freely within the uneven thickness of the clouds. He was feeling the high-speed rotation of the planet within the void of the universe. It was under the touch of such a marvelous scene that Luonan's sense of space had a marvelous distortion. A subtle change occurred in his observation of the real world. Luonan didn't know when it happened, but he suddenly felt a bit absent-minded. An inexplicable thought was born and it quickly magnified. Where am I? What kind of perspective am I using to observe this world, this planet, this universe? When doubts were about to fill his entire train of thought, the seed of an answer that had long been buried deep in his heart broke out from the ground. 3 long lines shot out together. They pierced through the boundless, penetrated the dim and bright, and penetrated the existent and the non-existent. They constructed a classical Cartesian coordinate system, locking Luonan himself at the origin. He was at a loss. He was cold. He was here, but he had nowhere to rely on. It was as if he was isolated from the world. From Luonan's perspective, the answer was not surprising. It was merely a single me. Aside from this, all thoughts and distractions were discarded. They were discarded like worn-out shoes. And it was precisely after he clarified this fundamental principle that a marvelous curve suddenly appeared in the world within Luonan's eyes. Chapter 576. The mess in the living room had already been cleaned up by the AI butler, but Ari was unwilling to return to the live camera no matter what. Even if the live broadcast platform wanted to argue with him about the contract and ask him for compensation, he would accept it. Just as he made up his mind, a communication wave penetrated through the wind and rain and came in. The one contacting him was the young man that his teacher, Gong Chi, had been nurturing for the past few years, Yuan Fei. This person was very lively and reliable. However, Ari didn't like him for no reason. At most, it was because the same sex repels each other. Yuan Fei had a smooth-sailing life under Gong Chi's guidance in the past few years. It was only when he messed up his business in Xia City that he came back dejectedly. Ari was happy for a few minutes because of this. Now that he thought about it, maybe he should give Luonan a drumstick first. That would make things more balanced. It was fine not thinking about Luonan, but thinking about that person made his mood sour. For a moment, Ari wanted to refuse the call with the reason that he was doing a live broadcast. But when he thought about how his every move could be said to be the center of attention, he couldn't hide the fact that he had temporarily left the table, so he could only answer the call with a toothache expression and said indifferently, "Hello. Senior Brother Luo, I wanted to contact you but I was worried that you were doing a live broadcast." Ari's toothache intensified. "What the hell are you staring at me for? Are you trying to snitch on me in the future?" And such a hypocritical and respectful form of address. Who knows what the other side is like? No matter what, it was unlikely that Yuan Fei would open a video call with Ari to verify the degree of respect behind the form of address. Of course Ari would do the same. The two of them pretended to communicate using traditional communication methods. Senior Brother Luo headquarters just held a joint conference. The president, the vice presidents, and the secretaries all participated. But the teacher is still absent. Ari furrowed his brows. Calling him teacher so intimately, have you confirmed your relationship? You haven't even offered him tea. Aren't you ashamed to talk about it? Ari was in a bad mood and was in no mood to respond. He said coldly, the teacher is in seclusion. Of course he doesn't have time. Which extraordinary ranked almighty did not take months to comprehend absolute arts. He has to leave seclusion after a meeting. What can he do in the end? but this involves Xia City's latest stance. I heard that someone has already proposed to ease the relationship with Xia City. A joint development or something. Once that happens, it will be difficult to make changes. Teacher Ri's chest tightened when she heard that. The photo of Jean Tong's headband was still going viral on the internet. Could the people from headquarters stop their greed for money? Even if you want money, you need to be alive to spend it, right? Looking at it from another perspective, the reason why a bunch of old fogies with their necks buried in the soil were working so hard was most likely because they wanted to extend their life with money to spend a little longer. A breakthrough cultivation theory did indeed have the opportunity to achieve this. That was what he thought, but he would never agree with Yuan Fei's words. He immediately put on the airs of a senior brother and scolded, "You've been working in the association for a long time, and you even have a position. Why are you spreading rumors? What does the association want to do? What does the teacher want to do? Do we need you to report it? You should learn from me and go into seclusion for a few more days. Cultivating and comprehending is the right thing to do." It felt much better to have someone to vent his anger on. No matter how scheming and shrewd Yuan Fei was, he couldn't calm down for a while after being forcefully rebutted by Ari. He stiffly replied, "Senior brother, I'm busy with a live broadcast. I won't disturb you any longer." Then he hung up. The relationship between the two sides would most likely be frozen for a period of time. Ari didn't really care. He had his family backing him. His starting point, achievements, and background, including his relationship with his teacher, Gong Qi, and their mutual interests, all of them crushed Yuan Fei. Yuan Fei only had a slight advantage in age and a bit of potential that hadn't been realized yet. If they really clashed, Yuan Fei wouldn't amount to shit. But some people had some words that only disturbed people's hearts. Yuan Fei's reminder caused Ri's train of thought to deviate a bit. He vaguely knew why his teacher had to go into seclusion. Some time ago, he had been ordered to hire professionals to search for the location of Snake Tongue's true body. It seemed that his teacher had set up a trap on Snake Tongue's missing soul body. He could retrieve the face he lost in Xia City. However, Snake Tongue was cunning and intelligent. She was also cautious. She had hidden her true body extremely well. He hadn't completed his task. He was originally worried that he would be reprimanded, but he didn't expect that there would be no follow-up. It seemed that Gong Qi had really gone into seclusion. He hadn't replied for a month. He had even gone to the point of fasting. Only the nourishment cabin responsible for maintaining his life was still operating. Ari was actually a bit worried. After all, Gong Qi had turned his seclusion, which was supposed to be a cover, into a real one. He had turned important matters that involved his face and personal interests into a fake one. It was quite inconsistent with his usual meticulous planning to the point of being cruel and ruthless. He felt that he had encountered some unexpected situation. So Re had bitten off more than he could chew when it came to the matters of Dripping Sword and Sprinkler Man. He had even continued to expand his influence. He wanted to probe the situation over at Xia City. The entire inner world knew of his relationship with Gong Qi. If his teacher were to suffer a great loss over there, the other side's response, especially a response from someone like Gao Tianshi, would most likely give some clues. The problem was that Xia City's response had been normal from the beginning until now. Everyone was tearing at each other, shooting their mouths at each other, greeting each other's parents and relatives. They were also mindful of their bottom lines. They wouldn't truly provoke trouble on the level of extraordinaries. Everything was far too normal. In addition, Gong Qi's near-invincible extraordinariness had brought about far too much inertia. It was to the extent that Re had gradually forgotten his original intentions. He had sunk deep into his favorite profession of shooting his mouth off and spitting his mouth until now. A person's thoughts were always strung together. The previously forgotten links were only temporarily buried by the dust and sand of emotions. Now Luonan had shaken the world with his heaven-bestowed talent and grandeur. He had taken out the picture of the golden copper headband and other stimulating information to show how extraordinary he was. He had contended with Ghost Eye in the Abyss region. He was calm and unruffled, skillful and at ease. These circumstances, which he had never thought of before, were strung together and suddenly raised the world. Of course, this included Re's own assessment of Luonan's status and ability. Some plots that he would never have thought of before were picked up one after another by the thoughts that blew away the dust and sand. They were like an iron chain that coldly stretched across the front, reminding Re of its existence. Mother****. Could it be that teacher really was tripped by a horse-tripping rope? Re still didn't think of the worst-case scenario. After all, the data from the life support system wouldn't lie. But he couldn't help but shiver in his heart when he thought of Gong Chi gnashing his teeth in frustration and helplessness. Oh, he was thinking too much, right? What if he wasn't? Ari couldn't stay any longer. If it really was a horse-tripping rope situation, then Gong Chi suffering a great loss was secondary. His closed-door training caused him to be cut off from information and then hit the wall again. The consequences were truly unbearable. Gong Chi couldn't bear it. He and his family couldn't bear it either. The more he thought about it, the more he felt uncomfortable. Re subconsciously reached out his hand and touched the emergency communication device he carried with him. According to Gong Chi, if there really was an urgent matter, he could use this communication device to wake him up from his special state and get in touch with him. It wasn't that Re had never done this before, but he couldn't find a reason to do so. Now that Jin Tong was killed, the cage theory was born, and even the Abyss District wasn't stable. All of this came from that damned Luonan. This should be an urgent matter. In the end, Re stomped his feet and practically closed his eyes as he walked to the study. He didn't dare to look at the discussions online anymore. He turned off the live broadcast and rushed out of the room like he was fleeing. He went straight out the door, started the car, and drove towards the secret location of Gong Chi's closed-door training. Emergency communication could be done over a long distance, but some words and some things were better said face-to-face. This was a matter of attitude. It was 4 or 5 in the morning in Chan City right now. Due to the hurricane passing through, it was raining cats and dogs. It could be said that one couldn't even see their fingers in front of them. Ari wasn't in the mood to play the midnight car game. He went straight into autopilot mode. The headlights tore through the darkness on the road as he advanced at high speed along the magnetic track. But this way the 10 or 20 minutes on the road would be very hard to endure. Did he want to listen to some boring news like, Guala rapidly upgraded to a Category 3 hurricane? Suspected to be influenced by factors other than meteorological conditions? So even though Ari screamed madly in his heart, I don't want to see it, his fingers still opened up the audio and video system honestly. He connected to the live broadcast platform and watched the latest news from the circular conference room in Xia City. Of course, the bullet screen and whatnot were all blocked. Then Ari saw Luonan on the podium. His eyes were half closed and his eyelids were slightly trembling. This scene wasn't much different from before. It was just that he was a bit more focused. But it was strange. The instant Ari cast his gaze on the podium, Luonan also opened his eyes. His gaze was focused on the camera. It was more like he was aiming at Ari's eyes. Ari's heart thumped. An inexplicable cold current gushed out along with the blood pumped out from his heart. It soaked half of his chest in a cold and soaked sensation. There was also a prickling sensation of being ground by coarse sand. What's going on? Has his fear of Luonan reached this level? The car speeding through the wind and rain wasn't affected by Ari's mood. It continued to drive strictly according to the established route. The AI butler followed its preset priorities and played the information that was currently most worthy of its owner's attention. It just so happened that it was news related to Hurricane Guala. The relevant situation was updated. Guala is predicted to make landfall on the west coast of Nadu Island in 20 minutes. The maximum wind speed at the center is currently 197 km per hour. The giant waves in the early stages are likely to bring along a Class C surge. A portion of the marine mutants will attack Nadu, Pala, New Ark and other coastal defensive lines. We can't rule out the possibility of a Class B or higher mutant appearing in the wind zone. Ari fiercely knocked on the steering wheel. He was a bit irritated. His route just so happened to be within the range of influence of the surge tide. If his luck was bad, he would encounter a few mutants that came ashore. That would truly be disgusting. However, listening to the unfinished meaning of the news, it seemed that the upgrade of Hurricane Guala this time was caused by the influence of a powerful mutant within the wind zone. A powerful vicious beast that could temporarily affect extreme weather hadn't appeared in the surrounding seas for a long time. Chapter 577. The hurricane several thousand kilometers away continued to approach the archipelago region. Luonan's mind had already reached the shore a step earlier. It continued to expand forward with a steady momentum. But the current expansion already appeared to Luonan as a different kind of law. The root of this expansion was not at the forefront. Instead, it was at the core of this expanding force. In other words, Luonan himself. Luonan's figure congealed on the podium. But the structure of space and time around him was like a projection that was hard to distinguish between real and fake. Layers and layers appeared with Luonan at the center. This was the bubble that he had demonstrated to the participants before. It symbolized the cage of humanity. Looking at it from this angle, everyone in the circular conference room, everyone in the Shangding building, everyone in Xia City, and even everyone within the range of Luo Nan's senses were wrapped within a bubble. The only differences were in terms of stability and range of coverage. Of course, the shape of each bubble was different as well. The bubbles of the vast majority of people, or rather, the majority of people, could collapse and regenerate at any time. But for a short period of time, the bubbles would warp and transform into all sorts of complex shapes. The reason for this was the pressure of other bubbles and even deeper environmental conditions. Right now, Luo Nan's bubble was one of the greatest sources of pressure for the people present. This bubble was far too enormous compared to everyone else. The stability of the core region far exceeded that of everyone else. So much so that the 1,400 people in the conference room were all suppressed to varying degrees. And under the effect of the group consciousness that had already been finalized, certain aspects converged to form the force field of the ring of blood and will together. But this did not mean that Luo Nan's own bubble could do as it pleased. Not to mention the powerful pressure from the 5 extraordinaries around him, the seemingly ordinary things around him. The podium, the circular conference room, the Shangding building. Everything he sensed on the plane of reality was simply a part of an incomparably enormous bubble. That incomparably enormous bubble was the environment of this world. It was the embodiment of space-time power that leaned more towards the material plane. Luo Nan faintly sensed the indescribably complex curvature of this space-time. In other words, it was tantamount to feeling the tiny traces of the boundless universe added to this place. Such a realization was undoubtedly the manifestation of his observational ability advancing a step further. It was in this context that new discoveries inevitably arrived. Luo Nan noticed that there were a few areas worthy of special attention on the complex curved surface of spacetime. The magnitude of the impact was not something that could be caused by any small bubble. Furthermore, there was a relatively fleeting point behind a certain massively warped region. It was similar to the basketball team of extraordinaries that hovered in the night sky of Xia City. From behind the warped and deformed structure, it radiated powerful stimulative information that made him unhappy. It was almost certain that this was a transcendent. Luo Nan's soul cloak covered an enormous area of effect, but it wasn't strange at all. Because part of it was based on the condensation ring, according to the different activity levels of water molecules, the progress in the ocean was faster, and the progress in the inland was slower. However, it almost covered the entire East Asian continent and half of the Pacific Ocean. It was just that Luo Nan knew that he was unable to handle the enormous amount of information within. He didn't investigate, didn't notice, and didn't do anything. He just maintained a normal state of attention towards a few sensitive areas. In such a vast area, no matter how rare extraordinaries were, it was still possible to encounter a few. But the problem was that the distance of this stimulation point was too close. Luo Nan's first reaction was that it was within the range of Xia City, but that wasn't right. The fuzzy judgment of being very far yet very close was truly nauseating. Luo Nan had no choice but to split a portion of his mind to pay attention to this point. After a few consecutive rounds of stimulation, he filled in more and more sensory information in an attempt to restore the information. As the constructed information became more and more complete, there was a sudden jolt. All sorts of one-sided information instantly combined in front of the answer that already existed, returning to their respective positions. In the end, what was restored in the domain of perception was the astral winds and clouds that spanned thousands of kilometers, as well as the blood-colored ape that flew back and forth. The cloud world. So naturally, the target that gave him negative stimulation also appeared, Gong Qi. This deputy secretary-general of the society, who had fallen into the clouds, was undoubtedly a psychic extraordinaire. He was a powerful person that stood at the apex of the inner world. Gong Qi floated within the astral winds of the clouds. His expression was grave and stern. It looked like he had yet to find a way to break through this cloud labyrinth. On the other hand, Luo Nan had already extended his consciousness to his headquarters. If Luo Nan were to use physical distance to discuss the situation, then Luo Nan's current situation was already difficult for Gong Qi to reach. Well, this was just a joke at the moment. But Luo Nan still remembered that Her Majesty Empress Wu had a request. She wanted him to achieve what was known as the enemy of 10,000. Luo Nan wanted to completely incorporate the situation he faced into the framework of formatting theory. He wanted to consider all sorts of factors and calculate all sorts of conditions. It was as if he was conducting a large-scale battle to solve a large problem. Now it was like this. It seemed that he already had an opportunity to include Gong Qi. Luo Nan wasn't prepared to act blindly without thinking before he could completely figure out the train of thought of this strategic plan. But there was an observation result before his eyes. It was impossible to ignore it no matter what. Luonan was certain that there was a similar type of bubble on the most complex and obvious curved surface of spacetime that he could observe. The bubble seemed to be a bit smaller, but it collided with the bubble, crisscrossing and deforming. It formed an indescribable shape, but it was hard to separate it as a whole. Similar collisions seemed to be occurring in various directions. But the main problem was that Luonan's consciousness followed the soul cloak and extended outwards. It followed the inconceivably warped surface. It seemed as though it was effortless for Luonan to move from one spacetime bubble to another spacetime bubble. The other spacetime was none other than the cloud world. Luonan's consciousness didn't go through the void corridor structure designed by his mother. He actually leaped over the barrier of spacetime and entered that marvelous world. Luonan was a bit stupefied. He couldn't help but consider. Was the warped scene he saw before him real? Was it normal and stable? What sort of meaning did it represent? There was some logic that could be deduced behind the newest observation result. It couldn't be ignored. It could be seen that on one hand, the atmospheric bubble contained the small bubbles. It delineated the rules and laws of existence, forming a livable environment. But on the other hand, the atmospheric bubble suppressed the small bubbles. The small bubbles also affected the atmospheric bubble. The small bubbles also pushed and warped against each other. From beginning to end, a kind of repulsive force was manifested. This was the relationship between the I and the not me that Luonan spoke of earlier. And this relationship could still be established by expanding outwards from a sociological perspective. It was like anchored a new argument for his grandfather's theory of the triple format of self, society, and heaven and earth. Luonan had yet to completely straighten out the logical relationship within, but he received this new level of information. The depth of his understanding of the range covered by the soul cloak increased by a large margin. Correspondingly, the amount of information contained instantly increased by several times. No, at the very least by several tens or even hundreds of times. Luonan lacked an accurate estimate of this. He still followed the established model and perceptual precision to analyze the situation of the relevant region, especially the problems related to the cloud world and the palace enlightenment. And the enormous flow of information squeezed in the next instant. It nearly stuffed his brain to the point of bursting. It was as if a nuclear bomb had exploded in Luonan's brain. The physiological fusing mechanism was forcefully activated. For 2 seconds his mind was practically blank. His reaction to the outside world had already come to a complete standstill. It must be known that aside from clairvoyance around the Chan City archipelago, he was also fighting against Ghost Eye in the Abyss region. The pressure was already quite great. If not for the fact that the force field of the Ring of Blood Will had stabilized, and the few consciousnesses within the force field had been stimulated to enter a semi-awakened state, it would have been equivalent to having a few more maintenance personnel. Otherwise, the space bastion might have exploded on the spot. No matter how big Luonan's heart was, he was shocked into a cold sweat upon encountering this sort of situation. Ghost Eye was quite astute. He sensed a large fluctuation in the defenses of the blood intent ring and immediately pulled back. He took advantage of the situation to end this confrontation, which no longer had any significance of verification. 500 kilometers away, Ghost Eye let out a breath of relief. The twisted handprints of his hands dispersed, and the sinister force field that nearly caused all the passengers on the luxurious cruise ship to collapse slowly disappeared. At this time, if the beautiful host, Dan E, could ask, "Mr. Ghost Eye, how did your bet go?" then the program would be considered complete. But the problem was that Dan E was able to sit steadily in her chair. Her body and consciousness were completely stiff. Though it wasn't as exaggerated as a certain person's claim that she was scared to the point of pissing herself, it was really difficult for her to continue hosting the program. Therefore, the audience of the inner world could only stare blankly as Ghost Eye slowly withdrew his power. He muttered to himself and put on a face that was neither happy nor angry to entice the imagination of everyone. Re, who was currently cruising in the wind and rain, couldn't help but fantasize about whether or not Ghost Eye had given Luonan a sneak attack and left a fatal hidden wound or something. There seemed to be some problems with Luonan's state in the last few seconds. The red and white color of the blood on his face was extremely obvious. Before Re could finish her thoughts, the car had already taken a detour from the coastal highway and entered a short-distance undersea tunnel that required an extremely high level of authority. This tunnel had undergone a special design. It used expensive special glass as its main body, achieving the effects of a single mirror and limited invisibility. Looking out from the inside of the tunnel, one could directly see the gloomy undersea world around the island. Looking in from the outside, one could only see a turbid turbulence. There were no traces of artificial construction. After passing through this tunnel, one would arrive at a group of small uninhabited islands and reefs that headquarters had specially opened up for closed-door cultivation. This was the legacy left behind by the eruption of a local volcano during the Third World War. Though the geological environment wasn't stable, it was extremely suitable for ability users of higher realms to cultivate and comprehend. It was said that it would yield twice the result with half the effort. Chapter 578. Even if RE was a grade B powerhouse, she still felt awkward and depressed that she was asking for trouble in such a hurricane, especially during the tide rush period. For a second or two he almost wanted to turn around and go back. But when she saw Luonan's clearly childish face within the video system, Luonan's face was calm and unperturbed. The blood pumped out of his heart was mixed with stimulating toxins. She no longer considered the possibility of giving up halfway. RE slapped the steering wheel heavily and got off the car. He registered with the security personnel in this area and asked for a raincoat that was better than nothing. Then he was about to rush into the curtain of rain. But the security captain called out to him at this time. This experienced B-rank person said very seriously, "Old he, right now Volcano Island has a guest staying for cultivation. Don't misunderstand if you encounter him." RE did not find it strange that a guest was stationed here. Since the cultivation effects of this small island were extremely good, many ability users were willing to pay a high price to rent the seclusion rooms of the upper echelons of the society to conduct critical cultivation. The society had specially arranged for a few similar areas to be rented out. Not only could they amass wealth, but they could also exchange resources with other people or powers. He went, "Oh." Then he asked in passing, "Which side is it?" "A certain upper echelon of the Order of Justice. I'm not too sure about the specifics." The Order of Justice. RE was startled. He thought to himself that this was the biggest joke in the world. Who didn't know that the Order of Justice's scales of truth was a first-rate treasure that aided in cultivation? Why would they need to ask the society for help if they had this sort of supreme-grade sacrificial artifact that could suppress the destiny of the Order? Could it be that they were secretly involved in some shady business? RE's mind spun a few times but he could not figure it out. He just responded, put on the raincoat and walked outside. He passed by his own flying car and subconsciously glanced inside. He saw the video system that had just been turned off not too long ago. A flash of inspiration suddenly flashed through his mind. At the same time, Luonan's excessively young face flashed through his mind. A thought suddenly turned through his mind. Speaking of which, wasn't it because of the Order of Justice that headquarters became enemies with the Xia City branch and provoked Luonan? He had once heard Gong Chi talk about the deeper reason behind this. Wonderful. RE only hesitated beside the car for 2 seconds before she tore off her raincoat and got back into the car. She clenched her teeth and entered the livestream platform again. She then turned on the cooperative livestream mode and bullet comments. Due to his arrival, the livestream inevitably received a huge amount of mockery. RE turned a blind eye to it, or perhaps he had fully absorbed the deep malice and triggered the same emotions in his heart. He faced the 30,000 viewers, twitched his lips and sneered, "Congratulations to everyone for witnessing a miracle." A 16-year-old kid who entered the inner world for less than 3 months had an extremely exciting and prolonged confrontation with a veteran extraordinary who has been at the peak for 30 years. Before he could finish, the bullet screen in the live streaming channel and the comments on the forum exploded. "Oh, I love conspiracy theories. SB. I told you this is purely a manga setting, okay? Moreover, it's facing the risk of being cut in half at the waist and having a bad ending. Goddess Ari, I don't understand what you're saying. Can you please be more suicidal? Tiger touching Ari, God, I'm going to eat some broken limbs and minced meat. Could it be that the Emperor's new clothes have been torn? Ghost Eye, what do you think? Luonan Hiyuan, what about you guys?" There were all sorts of comments. Although their stances were different, the confusion and doubt between the lines couldn't be hidden. Even though there had already been over an hour of foreshadowing and the subversive impact of the cage theory, a few minutes of a newbie and an experienced and powerful extraordinary fighting on equal footing still exceeded the limits of the majority of people's imaginations. The more experienced they were, the more inconceivable they felt. This was the first time RE's words had touched the hearts of the majority of people ever since she became a guest on the livestream. She had touched the extremely sensitive chord in people's hearts. RE paid no attention to the layer upon layer of bullet screens. She just twisted the corner of her lips and continued to sneer, "I'm not doubting Senior Ghost Eye's verification process. No matter how much Senior Ghost Eye doesn't bother with trifles, he still possesses the style that an extraordinary should have. It's impossible for him to put effort into a lie that can be easily seen through. I believe in his professional integrity and his ability to make wise and far-sighted choices. With a plan in mind, Ari easily made the majority of the audience dizzy. He looked at the questioning and cursing bullet screens in the projection area and shrugged calmly. Yes. I believe that there are no problems with the confrontation between Senior Ghost Eye and Luonan. I can even say that there are no problems with the strength that Luonan himself has displayed. He is worthy of being called the humanoid infrasonic array. He really does stand on a level that we cannot imagine. If I were to participate in this gamble, I would have already lost my pants by now. The surrounding 30,000 viewers online were truly stupefied. Some people even wanted to pull open the projection to see if there was a gun pointed at the back of Ari's head. Ari could show the back of his head to this group of scum, but he was more than happy to show his clear stance and his undisguised malice. Right now, Luonan was still standing on the podium in the circular conference room within the livestream. It was said that he was adjusting the structure of the blood intent ring to wake up those hypnotized idiots one after another. On the other hand, He Yuan's cold and clear gaze pierced through the camera lens. It was biting cold and piercing. Oh, this was the daughter of the He family, one of the most outstanding achievements of the Star Alliance Committee's Team AB. If she was standing in front of him, Ari really would have to behave himself. But they were separated by 7,000 kilometers. What was there to be afraid of? Therefore, Ari didn't stumble at all. He spoke eloquently. What I'm most curious about right now is how Luonan's strength and potential were accumulated and realized. How was he able to jump to this level in a short period of 70 to 80 days? This doesn't belong to the category of normal? Look, this is an abnormal situation. This is where the problem arises. At this time, it would be perfect if there was someone who could cooperate and act as a supporting character or something. Unfortunately, Ari wanted to continue singing this one-man show. Is Luonan a genius? I don't know. But from the information he registered with the headquarters, he wasn't one 2 months ago. He followed his family's so-called formatting theory and painstakingly accumulated for 5 years. He still hasn't touched the ceiling of awakening. He only became a psychic who was better than nothing. He relied on the garrulous psychic diagram and the outbreak of the calamity of the human-faced arachnid to enter the society's line of sight. Is this kind of person a genius? Ari had completely entered the mode of shooting his mouth off. This was his invincible state on the internet in recent years. I've even seen people say that Luonan has potential and accumulation. He just hasn't been enlightened yet. He entered the society and received proper cultivation guidance. Then he'll understand everything. I don't know if there's such a situation. I just saw him energetically advocating for formatting theory on the stage. He never mentioned a single word about the guidance of a senior or a friend. Of course, these words were a bit inaccurate. At the very least, Luonan had mentioned the guidance of Her Majesty Empress Wu. He had also talked about the condensation ring in class. But right now what was important was momentum and momentum. He didn't care about the details. Ari spread his hands and made a helpless gesture. There's nothing I can do if you guys think so. But if everyone still has a bit of critical spirit and the ability to think independently, then there's no harm in carefully considering this. Luonan, this mediocre genius, has miraculously risen for over 2 months. Aside from his dazzling deeds, what else has happened in Xia City? Aside from the calamity of the human-faced arachnid that I've talked about before? Oh, this is Quantum Corporation's fault. But could it be that everyone hasn't heard that this company has gone berserk and conducted experiments in Xia City? They've encircled their territory in order to excavate some hidden treasure in Xia City? Ari laughed very happily in the face of the rapidly boiling atmosphere in the live broadcast room. Also, the conflict between the Order of Justice and the Xia City branch has mustered a large force, and Xuanhuan and the majority of the branch have been destroyed. What? Could it be because of a hedonistic follower? A child? There's no need to hide the conflict between headquarters and the Xia City branch, including the 2000th young miss incident. Why has Luonan always become the focus of everyone? Could it be that he's a natural-born troublemaker and troublemaker? After considering all the subjective factors, shouldn't we also consider the more objective facts? When all the problems point towards a single focal point, we don't need to ponder over what he did. Instead, we need to ponder over where he is in reality, what kind of space and resources he occupies. You're perfectly fine blocking the middle of the road. If you don't get hit, who will? Don't you think so? After leaving behind a string of questions, Re simply cut off the live broadcast signal with a sneer. He opened the door and got out of the car. He no longer cared about the follow-up reactions. He knew that because of his overly straightforward hints, at this moment, at least half of the audience would curse him for having sinister intentions, shameless and despicable intentions. His personal reputation would most likely be ruined, and there might even be some trouble at the headquarters. But so what? After several minutes of confrontation between Luonan and Ghost Eye, he had already become a joke. There was nothing to feel distressed about. Plus, if Luonan was allowed to develop smoothly, given the conflict between Luonan and his teacher, and with himself, there would be conflict sooner or later. And it would certainly be to the point where one side would die. With Luonan's terrifying rate of progress, if he didn't take advantage of the opportunity to make a move now, would he wait until Luonan calmly amassed his troops and swept his path before regretting it? Truthfully speaking, even Re was a bit convinced by the end of his explanation. It seemed that there really was a high possibility of following this train of thought. It would really be funny if he hit the mark by a fluke. Re picked up the raincoat and put it on. He looked up at the sky. The rainwater poured on his face, bringing with it the cool and fishy smell of the ocean. It seemed to be the smell of Luonan's blood. He yelled, "Awesome!" He didn't care about the security captain's hesitant expression as he clenched his teeth and charged into the wind and rain. There was still a straight line of 40 kilometers to the location of Gong Chi's closed-door training. Even though Re was a B-rank power, he would still need to spend 20 minutes on the road in this kind of damned weather. It didn't matter to Re anymore. He faced the wind and rain, swiftly walking through the rugged environment created by the islands, reefs, and the curtain of rain. When he encountered the boundless sea surface where the seawater rose, he used his telekinesis to interfere and solidify it. He treaded on the water and was truly delighted. Before this, he had hoped that the security personnel of these islands and reefs would be strong enough to minimize the effects of tide rush. But right now he really wished for 2 blind mutants to jump out and serve as Lord Ho's practice. Unfortunately, the road to Gong Chi's closed-door training was peaceful and quiet. Rumble. Chapter 579. Re was startled and raised his head to take a look. However, there was nothing unusual in the vast water curtain. However, before he could turn his head around, another muffled clap of thunder rang out beside him. There was also turbulent and surging clouds that seemed to have sprayed out from the boundless curtain of rain, bringing along fine ice particles that were like the wind high up in the sky. They hit the back of his neck with a dense chill. Mutant. Re's first reaction was absolutely excellent. Although he was a spiritual type ability user, the psychic shield and confusion barrier he set up instantly formed a circle of hardness and toughness, as well as a shield that had the effect of interfering with bewitchment. The moment the cold air seeped in, his body had already split into 6 illusory shadows, shuttling in all directions. Unless it was a killing move at the level of a transcendent, it would be impossible to finish him off in one hit. However, the problem was that there was nothing else after the cold air, ice particles, and vast clouds. Re had been semi-invisible for almost a minute, and his soul power had been consumed a lot, but he did not find anything else. Around him, clouds and rain intertwined, blocking most of his vision. He could only see waves of turbulent clouds rushing past. Some brushed past him and some did not feel anything at all. Using his spiritual sense to judge, he was even more confused. He only felt that the inside was illusory and there was no fixed number. Moreover, through the clouds, the entire space seemed to be suddenly elongated and enlarged, and even shifted to a height of 10,000 meters. There was a blood-red light even further away. What the hell? Re's finger was already pressing the communication and alarm function of the bracelet. Currently, he was under the surveillance of the security team at all times, and he could ask for help at any time if he encountered any danger. As for the so-called practice, how could he take it seriously when he was just imagining things? The security team also responded instantly, and it was the captain of the security team who personally spoke. What's the situation? The environment here has changed. Re was halfway through his words when a blurry shadow flashed in front of him. He could not see it clearly, but he felt that it was extremely familiar. He subconsciously straightened his body and looked up, and saw the depths of the clouds again, the figure that seemed to be suspended in the air. This time he could not straighten his tongue. Oldie? As the captain of the security team called out, Re muttered, "Teacher?" As soon as his voice fell, the shadow over there disappeared in the rolling clouds. Secretary General Gong has come out of seclusion? The security captain was a little confused, but Ari couldn't care less. She leaped up and rushed toward the blurry figure. He ran forward a few steps but suddenly became alert. This was not Gongqi's style. Furthermore, this series of cloud images was too different from the natural environment of the island chain. Could it be a mirage? Or was it some kind of malicious illusion? After a moment of hesitation, the surging clouds and the rain suddenly faded away, just like how they came. The strange scene of the sky being distorted and expanded 10,000 meters high also disappeared. Everything returned to normal. At this time, the security chief also sent a message. The surveillance is in place. Your side is fine for now, Ari replied in annoyance. What about before? It's harder to get the surveillance equipment on a rainy day. I only saw a wave of fog. It's also shown on the device. Does that mean it's not an illusion? An illusion? The security chief didn't quite understand, but he also had a request for Re. He will be there soon. It's convenient for you now. Help take a look at the situation first. We'll definitely have to write a report later. None of us can escape. Re cursed in her heart and hesitated for a few seconds. She really couldn't stand the security chief's words anymore. Finally, she reluctantly leaned forward and deliberately walked slower. Unfortunately, no matter how slow he walked, it was impossible for him to wait for the security team to arrive. Moreover, in the situation just now, all the sense of distance became very blurry. He walked 7 or 8 steps forward and suddenly his feet stopped. Ari's skin was a little cold and astringent, and her consciousness was a little sluggish. That was the feeling of an illusory and extremely cold psychic power left in the air. That's right, this was indeed Gongqi's aura. He subconsciously tensed up and called out in a low voice, "Teacher?" There was only the sound of the falling rain and the rustling of the volcanic rocks. Other than that, there was nothing else. Ari looked around blankly. Reason told him that the scene just now was indeed an illusion. Otherwise, many of the phenomena could not be explained. However, the psychic imprint left in the surroundings was the most conclusive evidence. The conflict between the two sides directly stirred up his brain into paste. While he was still in a daze, he suddenly heard a very low sigh. A new plane. Who was it? Ari shuddered violently and almost jumped out of the shield again. However, for some reason, at the same time that the sigh sounded, all the strength in his body silently dissipated. His entire body froze there and he couldn't even move a toe. At this moment, Ari was so scared that he was about to pee. How could he not know that he must have bumped into the hands of some extraordinary? But who was it that could enter such an important place like the headquarters? Ari blinked and saw a blurry shadow behind the rain. It was different from the illusion just now. Although he couldn't see the figure's face clearly, he knew that it was a real person. And from the voice, he could hear that it was an adult woman. The person who came had no intention of taking a picture with him. She only whispered there, "This person has a bit of crooked luck." Are you talking about me? Talking to me? Ari wanted to move his mouth, but found that even his ability to speak had been taken away. And the woman said again, "He was just spouting nonsense on the live broadcast, using my church as an example. Now that there are signs here in your headquarters, I wonder how you will stop the mouths of the people in the world?" Sure enough, Ari's face first flushed red and then a little green. The person who came was really a high-ranking member of the Order of Justice. This was awkward. However, the woman was obviously not talking to him. There were other people present. Before he could finish his thoughts, the long feminine voice of the headquarters president, Abner, flowed out from the curtain of rain. The discovery of any plane should be the commonwealth of mankind. This is a good thing worthy of celebration. What is there to block? Since the Lord Officiator happened to be here, we might as well seriously discuss the follow-up confirmation and exploration matters. Abner spoke softly and paid attention to the ups and downs of his syllables, as if he was telling a child a fairy tale. However, Re, who knew his temperament well, subconsciously shuddered. This president was supposed to be in a meeting in Sandalwood City, but it was more likely that his main body was still in Sandalwood City. It was just that his mind wandered over here after receiving the news. Of course, President Abner could come to this small island if he wanted to. This was a matter of course. What really made Re's brain stupefied was the person President Abner had addressed. Officiator? The Order of Justice's officiator? Re froze in the curtain of rain. His entire body was soaked, but he didn't dare to move a muscle. There was a moment when he had the urge to tear off his own death-seeking mouth. Luo Nan, in the circular conference room 7,000 kilometers away, also wanted to tear off his own death-seeking tool. He didn't even have the time to rejoice that he had crossed the crater of abnormal states before he was forced into a corner by the meticulous mental senses of the two apex extraordinaries. Fortunately, the two extraordinaries were courteous to each other. Perhaps they were afraid of each other, so they wouldn't rashly touch each other's cage. Yes, it was more appropriate to use the term domain to describe it. The two's detection senses divided their territories, and they crossed each other. It was hard to avoid some areas where they didn't have a tacit understanding, so they left some gaps. Luonan was extremely decisive. He gave up all interference actions in that area in the first instant and entered pure observation mode. His consciousness jumped directly to the polar domain, and he didn't dare to play any more scouting or eavesdropping. He retreated all the way to the Xia City area. After confirming his safety, he couldn't help but laugh involuntarily. He laughed at his death-seeking behavior just now, and he also laughed at the big mistake the two extraordinaries had made. Plane? Was this the name given to the space-time bubble? It was quite magical, but it was completely wrong. Admittedly, the cloud world existed as a plane, but it couldn't be linked to the Sandalwood Island chain. Those abnormalities were nothing more than Luonan correcting the precision of his coordinate system and its mode of action. He made a big death. No, he made an experiment. Right now, Luonan was on the podium, broadcasting live under the gazes of tens of thousands of people. And he used the excuse of adjusting the blood wool bracelet to openly stare blankly. This sudden laugh made many people stupefied. Xuanhuan was currently in contact with several higher-ups of the branch due to Re's shameless remarks. They were discussing countermeasures. The contrast was too great when she saw Luonan's relaxed appearance. She subconsciously asked, "What's wrong?" "It's nothing. There's a problem with the coordinate system." Luonan came to his senses. He laughed and didn't speak anymore. But on the plane of his consciousness, there was a point of origin. There were 3 vertical and horizontal lines pointing to various directions and dimensions, delineating the scale of deep space, the Earth, and even the other space-time bubbles. Perhaps this sort of marking was meaningless to an objective world. But to Luonan himself, it was a type of high integration. It was similar to the clairvoyance mode of the life sketches from before. This sort of mode filtered and integrated a huge amount of information, forming a corresponding judgment that was only effective to him. Whether it was the large bubble, the small bubble, the large world, or the small cage, they were all similar and equivalent in his thinking mode. He could use the same observation standard to link them all together. Luonan was fully deserving of being an expert in doing this sort of thing. This was especially true of the mysterious I symbol and the classical Cartesian coordinate system that was formed from it. It was simply the best framework that was specially created for this purpose. The nearby Xuanhuan, the Order of Justice's first ablatum 7,000 kilometers away, and Gong Chi from another plane could all be identified and judged using the same standard. As long as Luonan's domain was able to effectively interfere with the area involved, he would be able to map his own rules into that spacetime. It was just that this way, when the observation target acted on 2 spacetime bubbles at the same time, there was no doubt that this was referring to Gong Chi. He would also stack the contents of the 2 different spacetime bubbles together. It was just like Re's hallucination. Luonan liked this result very much. And at the same time he knew that this could become, and he would do his best to make it into, a nightmare for many people. Right now there was no harm in starting from Chan City. His gaze turned to the live broadcast camera. In that position Zhangji was about to wake up. Anlong 7 had already opened his eyes a step earlier than her. His sharp gaze shot over. And it was from Long 7 that the nearly 1,500 participants in the round conference room woke up one after another. Quite a few of them felt as if they had just experienced an unrealistic dream. But at the same time, there were quite a few people who absorbed nourishment from this unrealistic dream. They reorganized the operation of their own abilities. As more and more people woke up, the conference room gradually became chaotic. Luonan was certain that he wouldn't let the class continue. He took advantage of the fact that most people still hadn't completely regained their senses to declare. Chapter 580. Congratulations, King of Luck, Mr. 1 in 1,000. Don't joke about this. It's not that rare anymore, okay? It can't be helped. As long as we meet in Xia City, we're doomed to not be able to escape. So what if it's always luck? This is crazy. Don't they think that just because I'm in Xia City, I'm definitely a member of the Xia City branch? It's probably because you look like a bro. Bamboo Pole laughed out loud. His reaction was a bit conspicuous in this high-class restaurant, but he didn't care about the gazes cast at him. He just raised his glass to the middle-aged, slightly plump, yet still handsome short-haired woman across from him. The latter also raised her glass and clinked it with bamboo poles. She sighed once more, "What an enviable luck. Especially when it's destined to fall on your head." Bamboo pole raised his eyebrows. "What do you mean? Isn't your relationship with that person destined to be the first to enjoy the moonlight?" "That's true, but can you please sit up straight first?" Xianxia didn't just say that before. She also used body language to express it. She smiled as she straightened her body. Under the light, the soul-stirring lines of her cleavage finally became a bit more normal. But she also mercilessly ridiculed her old friend. "B rank is for showing off, not for acting." "I'm not acting. It's just that the older I get, the pickier I get." Xianxia raised her glass again before it even touched the ground. She wanted to pour it on Bamboo Pole's face, but Bamboo Pole immediately begged for mercy. The two had been friends for several decades. They were infinitely close to being friends with benefits, but they were far more than friends with benefits. Their feelings were subtle and smooth. They didn't treat each other as outsiders when they spoke. Xianxia didn't hide her goal at all at this time. She took the initiative to clinch her glass with bamboo poles and said, "Now is the time for you to play your role." "My role? Intelligence? Your value lies in your relationship with Teacher Luo." This isn't slander. This is the truth. You are the first patient out of the 1447 people in the meeting to jump from C rank to B rank by some dog's hit luck. Why is it you and not someone else? Do you dare to deny that this has nothing to do with your friendship with that Teacher Luo? And then? Of course it's because of the ring of blood will. There's nothing wrong with the blood will hoop, but it requires a number of people, a circle, and experience. Adding all of these factors together, only Mr. Luo can satisfy them. That's true. Bamboo Pole had more or less understood, but Xianxia still wanted to make things clear. So I hope. Oh, to be more precise, Starry Sky Society hopes that Mr. Luo can come to our society and give another public lecture. The content can be the same as the one on the night of the 14th. Mr. Luo can do whatever he wants. All the preparations and expenses, including remuneration, we will definitely satisfy Mr. Luo. Of course, that includes you as a middleman. Bamboo Pole raised his eyebrows and laughed. Starry Sky Club? Bro, what are you doing? Xianxia shrugged. An academic conference and a business cooperation. The LCRF is cooperating with the branch. LCRF has never been the only shareholder of the Starry Sky Club. We just provide a place for everyone to communicate and occasionally do the most meaningful theme. Mr. Luo's ring of blood will possesses such value. Bamboo Pole smiled but did not immediately respond. Xianxia saw Bamboo Pole's reaction and knew that it would be difficult to persuade him this time. She also knew that although Bamboo Pole seemed to be joking, he was actually very determined. It would be very difficult to open an opening for him, so she settled for the next best thing. How about being a messenger? I'll pay you according to the middleman's price. After all, you still don't know Mr. Luo's own intentions. You have to say that to Secretary He. Besides, with your ability, are you afraid that you can't find a messenger? That's why I came to you. That's not because of your ability. Before he finished speaking, Bamboo Pole's increasingly sensitive senses noticed that a few tables away, a person was cautiously approaching and even making eye contact with Xianxia. Xianxia's genial expression probably made the person misunderstand something. The person straightened his clothes and hurried over. His heart was beating fast and he was a little nervous. However, his voice was still very clear and pleasant. Sister Jai, what a coincidence. Xianxia raised her eyelids and her smile faded a little. This is my territory. Are you surprised to see me? I'm the one who can't wait for more coincidences like this. Didn't I come here immediately? The person who came was a young man with handsome features. He was dressed in a decent casual suit, and the way he dressed his hands and feet were quite tasteful. What was more rare was that he knew how to speak. He held a bottle of expensive red wine in both hands and stood there in a very stylish manner. He was a celebrity that left a deep impression on people. In fact, he was indeed a celebrity. Bamboo Pole, who usually paid attention to beautiful celebrities and entertainment gossip, quickly recognized that this person was called Lan Lin. He was a popular idol in the past 2 years and he seemed to have a good image. Lan Lin smiled and took 2 more steps forward. She nodded politely at Bamboo Pole, and then her eyes flew to Xianxia's face. She bent down and moved her face closer to Xianxia. She lowered her voice and said, Sister Jai, are you free tonight? Without waiting for him to finish, Sun Jia's faded smile bloomed again. The next moment she reached out and pinched Lan Lin's chin. After all, they were in front of people. Lan Lin's expression slightly stiffened. He instinctively wanted to turn his head. He wanted to avoid it, but he also wanted to see what his target was. He quickly suppressed his impulse and let Sun Jia do it. Sun Jia's grip wasn't too strong, but it wasn't too weak either. She pulled off half an inch from Lan Lin's neck, as if she were treating an Alaskan Malamute. Lan Lin even narrowed his eyes and snorted. Sister Jia? It was an amazing reaction, so Sun Jia smiled quite happily. Unfortunately, in front of an ability user, the conflict in this reaction could not be hidden at all. Bamboo Pole didn't even blink. He didn't think it was strange. He already knew that this friend of his was a lustful person who liked to seek all kinds of stimulation. As a senior manager of the Starry Sky Club in Xia City, he was fully deserving of his position of power in Xia City. Finding a few celebrity dogs to have fun with was nothing. Of course, understanding was one thing and approval was another. In the past, because of her temperament and beauty, Bamboo Pole had wanted to pursue her. Later, after seeing her true colors, he could only be friends. Sun Jia openly flirted with her dog. Bamboo Pole minded his own business and tasted his wine. But at this time, he noticed that a gaze was cast over from where Lan Lin had come from. The gaze was filled with surprise and anger. Bamboo Pole could sense it. Sun Jia was no exception. But she didn't care about that side. After testing the feel of his chin, she patted Lan Lin's left cheek. She used quite a bit of strength. Pia. The left side of Lan Lin's face turned red. Sun Jia's tone was quite intimate. Unaccountably solicitous. Is for that event, right? Lan Lin's smile became even more brilliant. He focused his gaze on Sun Jia, trying to show the moist and adorable feeling of a dog's eyes. If it were any other time, perhaps Sun Jia would chat a bit more with him. But right now there were more important things to do. She didn't want to waste time. You can't even complete the most basic task. Don't even think about being a guest. Just do your best service. Go. Don't let your imagination run wild. Lan Lin was a little anxious. But then he saw Sun Jia's sharp and cold eyes. He subconsciously shivered. He didn't dare to say a word. He bowed and retreated. And now Bamboo Pole was in a watching mode. He watched Lan Lin leave in a daze. Soon he got into a quarrel with a beautiful girl who came with him. That beautiful girl was probably broken by Lan Lin's dog mode. She was so angry that she cried and left the table. Oh, that beautiful girl seemed to be an artist too. What was her name again? Is it interesting? Sun Jia raised her glass. She was about to get down to business with Bamboo Pole. But seeing Bamboo Pole's interested look, she smiled and snapped her fingers at Lan Lin, who was wearing sunglasses and a mask to avoid the strange gazes of other people in the restaurant. Lan Lin didn't care about anything else. He quickly walked over. Sister Jia? Sun Jia smiled at him. What's your girlfriend's name? She's not. Lan Lin wanted to deny it. But when he met Sun Jia's eyes, he could only answer honestly. She's Clara. She's a member of BHD. We're in the same company. She's a good girl. I feel sorry for her. Chase her down and have a drink together. Don't make it too ugly. Lan Lin was a little confused. He couldn't guess what Sun Jia was thinking. But suddenly there was a turning point. No matter what, he had to seize it. He immediately responded and rushed over. Bamboo Pole curled his lips. You think you're an omnivore? Don't be ungrateful. I prepared it for you. Don't. I don't play this game. You think it's too light? We can go together. Get lost. Now Bamboo Pole wanted to pour wine in Sun Jia's face. Sun Jia didn't think much of it. She held the cup and lightly touched her chin. She smiled at him and said, You've reached a certain level of acting now. But since we're friends, can you tell me what kind of person Mr. Luo is? What do you want? We're in the service industry. We need to do some research. Get lost. Bamboo Pole made his attitude firm again. He didn't want to talk about this topic anymore. He turned his head to watch the real-life idol drama. At this time, Lan Lin had already caught up with Clara when she rushed out of the restaurant. He reached out to grab her arm. But in the next second, Clara, whose face had turned pale, was protected in someone's arms. Lan Lin, on the other hand, was kicked into the restaurant's glass door. Bamboo Pole saw who it was. What? He looked at Sun Jia. Chapter 581. Luo Nan, who was outside the restaurant, was a bit baffled. Out of the blue, A beautiful girl with a pale face bumped into his embrace. Then a fully armed fellow with sunglasses and a mask caught up from behind. He didn't care about the group of people and extended his hand to pull. Then the hedonistic young master Donglu, who was treating tonight, sent a flying kick. He sent the sunglasses masked man flying into the glass door. The sunglasses were slanted, revealing a large portion of his handsome and twisted face. He had a bit of an impression. With great difficulty, Luonan was able to match the handsome faces and identities of the man and woman. Ha, Clara? They were all from the same company as his sister. Clara in his embrace was a member of the BHD group. Though it was an 18th tier group, she was extremely good-looking. Another member of the group, Bai, had contacted him twice recently. They had arranged to have a meal together. Their relationship could be considered decent from Luonan's perspective. As for the sunglasses masked man, he had an impression of him. Lan Lin, the so-called high-quality idol. But he still hadn't been captured? He was one of the female celebrity Ji Qiong's friends with benefits. It was reasonable to say that he was a high-risk person for the mutant infection. What the hell was the branch doing? Oh my, we're kindred spirits. Perhaps it was Luonan's misperception, but Donglu's tone was a bit odd. However, this also proved that Donglu finally recognized who this person was. The smile on his face changed a bit. He walked over with his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't wait for Lan Lin to crawl up and stomped him to the ground. I never thought that you would have a bit of dog's hit luck, kid. Donglu had stomped Lan Lin in order to express his attitude in front of Luonan. But now it was inevitably mixed with personal resentment. He twisted his neck, feeling unwell from head to toe. He originally wanted to have a one-night stand with that female artist called Ji Qiong, but he never thought that she was actually a carrier of the mutant infection virus. He was tossed and turned by the military medical organization several times in the following week. It was with great difficulty that he was able to pass the test. Now it seemed that the kid Lan Lin had escaped a calamity. This made him feel quite unhappy. Donglu felt that it was natural for his family to stomp on others, but he was a bit too arrogant. Lan Lin was an idol that millions and millions of boys and girls chased after him. How could he endure such extraordinary humiliation? As an idol, Lan Lin's physical qualities were decent. He immediately arched his back and straightened his body, causing Donglu to stagger. Then he held the glass door and struggled to get up, shouting, "Security, security!" Lan Lin's personal assistant, follower, and bodyguard discovered the problem at this time. They made a big fuss as they rushed over. Luonan and Donglu had no lack of bodyguards by their side. As for the restaurant security guards, it was impossible for them to ignore this situation. They immediately sent more people to control the situation. A group of people crowded the entrance of the restaurant. Luonan was very vexed by this sort of scene. If tonight's banquet didn't involve an important matter, he simply wanted to turn around and leave. Luonan let out another sigh. He lowered his head to look at the beautiful girl in his embrace, who was in a dazed state. "Hey Clara, are you all right?" The second greeting finally brought Clara back to her senses from her absent-minded state. She quickly recognized Luonan. She also roughly recognized the current situation. She subconsciously struggled for a bit and came out from Luonan's embrace. "Thank you, Mr. Luo." The way Clara addressed him was far more distant than on the day they first met. She wasn't in a good state of mind, but she also had the modesty of a woman. She also wanted to save face. The more it was like this, the harder it was to say some words. She was even more unwilling to stay here for too long. She didn't turn around to look at Lan Lin's condition. She bowed once more towards Luonan. "I'm sorry for disturbing you. I'll apologize to you later." Clara didn't even raise her head after speaking. She wanted to leave with quick steps. Just as she passed by Luonan, Luonan grabbed her by the arm and pulled her to a stop. "Wait a moment. Don't go yet." This action was more or less the same as Lan Lin's. Clara's heart tightened and she looked back in shock. The entrance to the restaurant was crowded with people. Naturally, Donglu wouldn't put himself in danger. He had long since retreated back. He was originally mulling over how to deal with that pretty boy Lan Lin, but when he saw Luonan's actions, he couldn't help but join in the fun. He immediately laughed. "Look at the trouble in front of you. You want to leave with just a word of thanks? How could it be that easy? This fellow wouldn't be able to sleep if he didn't take liberties with the beautiful girl." It wasn't even a matter of taking liberties. At least Luonan remembered that Donglu was quite interested in Clara during the last rehearsal. So Luonan gave him a cold glance. Donglu immediately responded with a smiling face, appearing to be quite good-tempered. But at this time, whether it was Clara who was close by or Lan Lin who was separated by the crowd, they both recognized this extremely famous crown prince bro in their circle. With Luo Nan's keen senses, he was already aware of Clara's instantly stiffening body and her highly taut mental state. This made her even more terrified and flustered than when Lan Lin had caught up. It was very clear that the young girl's thoughts were crooked. As for Lan Lin, when he saw He Donglo's face clearly, his chest, which was about to explode from being squeezed by a ruthless aura, was like a punctured balloon. In a short amount of time he became a piece of soft skin. The ground beneath his feet became even softer. He shrunk down the moment he touched the glass door. In his mind he just wanted to be a dog. He borrowed the crowd of people in front of him to tuck his tail between his legs and hide in a crack in the ground. Oh, Lan Lin subconsciously shot a glance at the restaurant when he thought of a dog, but he didn't see the woman who had driven him here. This sucked away the last bit of strength he had. It was as if his brain had been scrubbed clean. Large expanses of blankness. Oh my, did I say something wrong? He Donglu really liked this sort of boss, who became the focus and source of everyone's fear. No, he didn't need to act. If he didn't rein in the rope, then this bro would be a devil incarnate. It wouldn't be a pity if he was stabbed to death by a hero. Luonan didn't want to stab him to death for now, but he really wanted to give him a kick. This was clearly a very serious matter, yet this silk pants had bumped into a fork in the road. Actually, Luonan's thoughts were very simple. He had seriously sized up Lan Lin before, confirming that this person hadn't been infected by the mutant virus. But the homework he had done some time ago showed that there was a difference between an infected person and a carrier. Lan Lin, who was a public figure, was a natural spreader who couldn't control his pants. He was truly a very troublesome source of danger. Though Luonan didn't care about the mutant virus infection anymore, Clara was still a friend he had interacted with before. Expanding layer by layer, there was also the BHD group Hai Jing, and even the circle of relatives and friends like Emoya. Looking at the relationship between Clara and Lan Lin, they should be quite close. If by any chance she was infected, then the problem would be very serious. For the sake of caution, Luonan had to do an examination. He couldn't let her leave no matter what. Right when he was having a headache about how to convince the fearful Clara to accept the examination, someone walked over with a smile. She held Clara's other arm. "Barbie, don't listen to their inappropriate words." Clara, who was in a state of panic, turned her head when she heard someone call her by her nickname. She saw a woman wearing sunglasses, dressed in a low-key and elegant manner. This face was even more familiar, even though it lacked the powerful aura that she usually had. Sister Weiwei. The person who had come was actually the first-rate female artist of the company. She was a strong competitor for the future #1 sister, Shi Wei. Only now did Clara recall that Shi Wei was He Donglo's lover. It wasn't unexpected for them to appear here together. Clara looked at the beautiful and familiar face before her eyes. Even though they weren't normally close, Clara still felt a bit emotional. The rims of her eyes immediately turned red. The current Shi Wei wasn't as aloof and cold as she normally was. Instead, she displayed the bearing of the #1 sister of the company. "Barbie, you should be happy that you kicked a trash man ahead of time. Okay, if you keep shedding tears, I can't help but question your level of image management." "I'm sorry." The stricter seniority relationships in the company as well as the clearer hierarchy made Clara's heartstrings subconsciously taut. Actually, her heart was still filled with bewilderment and fear right now. Shi Wei's appearance didn't lower the intensity of her fear. Instead, it increased it. After all, this wasn't a group occasion in the company. She even hid it from her manager, Hai Jing, in order to go on a date with Lan Lin. It would be great if things really developed like a romantic story. But she was truly alone and helpless in this current situation. It was also at this time that all sorts of facts and rumors within the industry were like demonic winds blowing from all sides. They seeped into every gap in her thoughts. At this very moment, let alone Shi Wei, even if the company's supervisors and directors were here, it would be hard for Clara to think in an optimistic direction. Shi Wei's unprecedentedly gentle tones still lingered by her ears, but it seeped into the bottom of her heart with a dense chill. "This is the suburbs. You're in a daze right now. No one will feel at ease if you go home by yourself. How about?" Shi Wei originally wanted to drag Clara along to the banquet. Seeing Luonan's reaction, Shi Wei had a good impression of this little girl. But when she spoke to this point, she felt that she couldn't overstep her boundaries. She couldn't help but be stuck for a moment. Then someone followed up her words. "How about we first get a room to rest for a bit and tidy things up? We can wait for Mr. Luo to finish his discussion and come out. Then we can go back together. Someone pushed open the restaurant's outer door as they spoke. Warm steam came out along with a fragrant wind, blowing away the crowd of people outside. Luo Nan saw that the speaker was a middle-aged woman with a unique temperament. She had short hair similar to a boy's, and she wore a low-cut suit geared towards women. She was a bit unfamiliar. But the person walking shoulder to shoulder with her couldn't be any more familiar. Brother Bamboo Pole. Bamboo Pole beamed as he waved his hand in greeting. You're free today. Come eat a feast. Young master, he is treating. Brother, I'm also here to see a friend. Bamboo Pole didn't chat with him in depth. He nodded and gave the initiative of the conversation back to Sun Jai. Sun Jai didn't pay attention to the other people present. She walked straight to Luo Nan, bowed slightly and offered her name card with both hands. Sun Jai, one of the local supervisors. I failed to control the situation just now and disturbed Teacher Luo. I ask for your forgiveness. Since she called him Teacher Luo, then she was certainly from the inner world. She was also Bamboo Pole's friend. Luo Nan wouldn't treat her badly. He accepted the name card with both hands. He felt that Sun Jai's suggestion had touched the bottom of his heart. He took advantage of the situation and said, Sister Sun's suggestion is the best. Clara, why don't you rest here for a bit? We can go together later. Luo Nan needed to give Clara a checkup. He also needed to contact He Yuan or Her Majesty Empress Wu to clearly ask about the follow-up handling of the mutant invasion. He had already instructed Qin Yikuan, who followed by his side, to make arrangements through the Hexa year. However, he was a bit regretful at this time. He didn't bring Cat Eyes along. Otherwise, he would have saved quite a bit of time and effort. Realistically speaking, Clara's will didn't carry much weight now that Luo Nan had made the decision. Luo Nan was worried that she was overthinking things. He simply flipped through his communications book. How about I get someone to come over and accompany you? Bai Yu and the others are nearby. Cat Eyes. No need. I'm fine by myself. Clara's voice was a bit hurried, reflecting an intense feeling of rejection. But soon she pursed her lips and lowered her eyelids. Her slightly curled hair hung down from her forehead. She really was like an exquisite Barbie doll, allowing herself to be manipulated by others. It seemed that there really was a bit of a misunderstanding. Luo Nan was able to feel that Clara's mental cage was withering and warping. There was still a bit of space that was unwavering. This kind of willpower had already exceeded the norm. Shi Wei continued to display the demeanor of a big sister. She stuck closer to Clara's body and laughed lightly. I can accompany Barbie for a chat. I'm not joking. I've always felt that this is a good thing. Clara didn't open her mouth, so she didn't have any objections. Luo Nan grunted and He Donglu didn't refuse. He just said, You're done settling things. Hurry up and come over. And so, the matter on this side was settled. He Donglu and Luo Nan walked inside, and the crowd of people in front of the restaurant naturally dispersed. As for a certain person who was curled up into a ball by the glass door, who cared? Luo Nan turned his head back. His target was Bamboo Pole. Bro, do you want to come together? No need. Let's not disturb each other. Bamboo Pole giggled and waved his hand. Sun Jai shot him a covert glare, but Bamboo Pole didn't pay any attention to her. Luo Nan saw all of these small details and chuckled twice. He felt that this was a bit interesting. He really envied Bamboo Pole's carefree and easygoing attitude. Not to mention that Bamboo Pole also hid extraordinary wisdom within. Whether it was the depth and breadth of knowledge when Bamboo Pole taught him, or the penetrating and incisive theses of the order, or the fact that Bamboo Pole was the first to break through the barrier of nearly 1,500 participants and enter B rank. All of this proved that Bamboo Pole was extraordinary. The group of people continued to walk inside. Yidonglu was a young master who loved to step on salted fish the most. He felt refreshed and his mind was lively, so he came over and said, Since we're friends, let's drink a few cups together. Actually, it's good to have Clara accompany you. We brothers drink for the sake of being relaxed and at ease. Luo Nan cast a sidelong glance at him. He never felt that he had any sort of brotherly friendship with this fellow. They walked a few more steps as they spoke, and 4 diners suddenly stood up at a table at the edge of the aisle. They greeted from afar, Teacher Luo. Hidonglo's words were interrupted. He was stupefied for a moment. Luo Nan blinked his eyes and responded, hello. Luo Nan thought that perhaps they were people who had participated in the training course on the 14th. As for the specifics, how could he remember so many people when there were 1,500 of them? Luo Nan didn't pay attention to this sort of thing. He passed by the table of people. But a mere half a second later, a figure stood up diagonally in front of him. It was originally a single person, but the momentum caused the people at the table to be unable to resist. They subconsciously stood up as well. Teacher Luo. It was still an unfamiliar face. He was 40 or 50 years old, but he was the same as the people at the table in front of him. All of them had respectful expressions on their faces. The confused expressions of the other people at the table were all the more distinct. Luo Nan could only respond, "No need to be polite. You guys eat." You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.